The May session for Sedona Fire District Board meeting is now in session. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing for a moment of silence.
We lost 9 firefighters and 26 police officers in the line of duty since our last meeting.
Thank you. Please be seated. Okay, the first order of business is going into an executive session for today. So the motion to go into executive session pursuant to ARS 38431.03A5 in reference to discussion or consultations with the designated representatives of a public body in order to consider its position and instruct its representatives regarding negotiations with employee organizations regarding district's MOU. Additionally, ARS 38431.03A3 for legal advice regarding the same, and finally for ARS 38431.03A4 for instructions to legal counsel regarding those negotiations and the terms of the MOU. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We are now in executive session. From executive session and as a result, I'd like to make a motion to approve the MOU for IAFF Local 3690 and the ASEA Admin Support Employee Association for approval of the MOU for fiscal year 2021. Do I have a second?
Second.
Do I have any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The MOU for both organizations for fiscal year 2021 has been approved. Okay. All right. With that said, we are now in the budget workshop. Gabe Boldra, you are on.
So, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to,
Okay.
while Gabe gets queued up here, I'm going to give a little introduction because I'd like to highlight some things to help introduce the budget, and then Gabe will go through the structured budget. Then obviously, if the board has direction or input, we'll receive that there at the end, and or if there's questions in the middle of it. But first of all, I kind of wanted to highlight staff's goal. So when we looked at this budget and the decisions we made and how we walked down this budget, there's a handful of bullet points I want to highlight. So one thing is we wanted to provide a budget that was accurate to the district's needs. So again, look at actuals, look at what the need is to manage the day-to-day operations, and also to project out with the capital. Another thing we focused on is we wanted to be as effective and efficient as possible from a fiduciary standpoint. So we're really trying to manage that dollar to best advantage. And we understand where that dollar is coming from. So we want to do a good job doing that. We want it to be efficient and effective. Another thing is forecasting the district's need into the future, and that's that capital element again. This district does a very good job of thinking long-term with capital when it comes to our bigger ticket items, and I think that's wise, and I think the board and past administration has done a very good job of that. So we want to continue that. And then also just continue to develop and implement initiatives to manage the budget. So we're going to work with the needs, we're going to look at the dollars, we're going to look at the line item, but it's also about what we can do to offset and to manage that dollar, again, to best advantage. So just as a note, the increase to this budget, this draft budget that we're presenting to you here tonight, was a 6.01% increase. And due to increased non-levy funding, the impact of the increase to the taxpayer is 4.38%. So we thought that was pretty good. Typically, when we look at long-term projections, you'll see Gabe's charts. You can look at the budget 10 years out, but we typically are going to structure increase in there. It's not atypical to have about a 5% increase in what we're projecting. Obviously, it's unpredictable until you get into that fiscal year and know what's going on with the economy and interest rates and everything. So we wanted to make sure that was clear. And again, the overall goal of this budget is we want to think long-term. We talk, we don't want to see big spikes in that line. We want to see gradual. So I think that's, those 4 bullet points are really what the attempt of staff was with this current budget. Now, when it came to the process, one thing I want to highlight and note is last year under Chief Coyle, the effort really was to improve the accuracy of the budget to compare to what we actually spend. So for example, if we had a line item that was $30,000 annually, and we looked at the 3 years prior actual, and it was only $20,000, we adjusted it down to $20,000 because that's what we need. We've proven that's what we need by looking at actual. So there's a huge effort last fiscal year, the current one we're in the budget process to really reflect an accurate need. We've kept that same philosophy in this budget to reflect an accurate need. So using terms, this is an accurate budget that's lean. The goal wasn't to put fluff in the budget. So we've really had 2 straight fiscal years where we've really tried to make it an accurate budget that reflects the needs. So we wanted up front, I wanted to kick it off saying, hey, we wanted to be clear that there was a lot of thought put into this and the process. So if we talk about process, we go back to January, Gabe, our finance director, we kicked off and had a corporate meeting with our leadership about the budget process and the timeline and some of the expectations like we just expressed in terms of our overall goal. And then our finance director provided all the templates and budget worksheets, so each manager that had different responsibilities could start to go through and look at their line item and look at their increases and look at their need. And then the next layer, that manager with their supervisor went through those same budgets and line items. And then we pushed it up to executive staff, and we went through all of it. So ultimately, the finance director and myself went through all of it. So when you go back to January and you look where we started, even 1 month, the last month, the first line item budget that we presented to the board and draft last month to this month, there's a lot of staff work put into evaluating each division, evaluating each line item, and looking at the actual need, and making sure that the budget reflected the need. And also the budget, the attempt to integrate the budget with our strategic plan. We talked about strategic plan, how we're updating it and kind of reforming some of the goals. Part of it is we want to make sure that we're integrated with the budget. So if we give a divisional leader certain goals and objectives in the strategic plan, we want their division and their line item budget to reflect those goals and objectives. So it was a very long, robust process with what I would say a lot of careful thought put into it. Again, I think we've had 2 fiscal years now where we have a lot of the same philosophy in terms of our overall goal and what we want the budget to reflect. So are there any questions on our overall goal or our process for the board at this point? Okay. So the other 2 things I want to highlight before I kick it over to Gabe are, I just mentioned that, we want to be prudent, and we want to also evaluate initiatives to help manage the budget. So I want to highlight some of those initiatives that affect fiscal year 21. So one is a significant grant, which we've talked about, which is the radio grant. So the radio grant that staff obtained was $231,000, and that money was set aside for fiscal year 21 to buy radios. Well, since we have a grant, that's a good management technique, is we keep going after grants. And we might have money saved for those radios, but now we can retask it to shore up other areas or use it to best advantage. So the radio grant was a big deal. Another initiative that we put in this fiscal 21 budget is to hire 3 drop firefighters. A couple reasons for that. One, it helps manage mandatories. Mandatories where nobody signed up to work, somebody goes home sick, and we look at the next firefighter and say, you're going to stay here and work today. And we force hire mandatory. Sometimes we have to do that to keep our staffing levels. So hiring 3 drops will help manage the mandatories. It also will help manage the overtime budget. So when way we structured it, it came up to about $135,000 initiative. Another one is workers' comp, and we're going to talk more about workers' comp. We have another agenda item for a recommendation from staff to the board. So workers' comp, obviously we know it's been a little bit of a roller coaster the last few months with the changes in workers' comp in the state and some of the legislation that was before the legislature earlier in the year. And so we were getting all kinds of crazy premium numbers, and so finally that's settled, and we were able to, in this budget, structure what we think will be the best long-term approach. And it's a district pool that we're going to talk more about in the agenda item, but what that did for our day-to-day budget from the first line item we had in April is we dropped it $250,000. So that's significant on the day-to-day budget, that kind of drop. Again, initially when we looked at the budget, we had to structure some pretty big numbers into that workers' comp because it was so unknown. What we didn't want to do is not have it structured in there and then have a big swing the other way. Another thing, and this is a very important one, is when you look at our non-personnel expenses, okay, so obviously when we look at our graphs, we know that the vast majority of expense to run a fire district is personnel, and that's really any public agency. So when you look, though, just at our non-personnel expenses, we actually, in this budget, dropped those $20,000 from last fiscal year. Now, I think that's significant because, again, we're not trimming things out to where we can't function safely or meet the needs of the community or carry out the mission. That's not the goal of this budget. Remember, we talked, we want it to accurately reflect the need, and then we want to think long-term and project over time so we can continue to improve our service. So, to me, the non-personnel expense, to hold it at status quo, drop it slightly, that was a big deal. So when I looked at the grant for the radios, the 3 drop firefighters, dropping our day-to-day operating premiums with workers' comp, our non-personnel expense decrease of 20, that came up to $636,000. So when I talk initiatives and how we're managing the budget and looking at fiscal year 21, I've identified a really large sum there that I think that was just hard work by staff. How do we manage this and how do we do this? So there's other initiatives I want to highlight a little bit here because there are certain initiatives that we've implemented for fiscal year 21 that will have a fiduciary or a positive impact on the budget, although we can't quantify them as of yet. So one is the district pool, and I don't want to go completely into that right now, but we think it's better long-term approach. It's Arizona district money, it's Arizona money. There'll be a governing board over it where we can implement measures, where we can do cost savings, where we can map out premiums. We think we're going to have more local control, and we think we're going to manage those dollars better, and we think long-term, the things that we can do, we think we're going to manage our workers' comp better. So, we don't know the impact of that yet. I know that day-to-day operating, we can drop the premium. There's a capitalization we'll talk about. That's going to cost. But again, it falls under our goals of long-term thinking. How do we make it better long-term? So the pool was a really good example of an initiative that we could put in 21 to manage the budget, but we don't necessarily have a cost dollar to it, as the other ones I spoke of. So we're always trying to work on our finance, improve different areas. We've been looking at our EMS billing and making sure that we're reporting accurately, which we are, but looking at how we do it and how we can improve it. You know, that's another source of revenue, but, you know, it can be as simple as how quickly we bill. And maybe we get more back because we bill quicker. So there's a lot of stuff with that, but that's an area we have been meeting and looking at and trying to improve. Again, we don't have a cost to it yet, but it is an initiative that will affect fiscal 21 as we continue to look at that. Another thing is our Wildland Program continues to expand. You know that we had the grant for another drone or SUAV, small unmanned aerial vehicle. That program is continuing to grow. Now, it's district use right now, but obviously like our REMS teams, our fireline medic teams, our Type 6 engines, our Type 3 engine that we implemented. They will deploy and protect the district, but they'll also deploy outside of the district. And we also know that there's revenue connected with that. So we always continue to look at our priorities, and Wildland's a good example on, hey, you know, a side benefit is we're getting revenues, but we're improving our service here, but we're also improving our ability to capture revenue. Of course, we know we have a lot of infrastructure in terms of our towers, and we know we get some rent for that. We're going back through different contracts. We know one contract that we're looking at currently that we're going to improve. So the intent is, as we do that, we're going to go through all of them and see how we can improve those contracts efficiently, effectively. You know, if there's sub-lease capability, or we're going to do that. So that's another initiative that fiscal 21 is going to be impact. Training is a big area for us that we're really looking for efficiencies. One thing we're developing the training division is a matrix on who goes to what kind of training. That helps manage that dollar, and then you send that person to that training, they come back and train the rest of the district. And things like the Zoom platform, the board approved an upgrade in our technology when it came to the Zoom-like platform, where we can interface with other agencies, we can interface with all the stations. You know, the opportunity if we're doing a lecture and we say, hey, everyone stay in their station, do the lecture. If you get a call, go do it, tape it, come back and review it. It saves fuel, it saves time. Some of that training we can do where we improve, where we don't have backfill. For example, the medic course that we use, we offered to host it. Well, that means the medics, the firefighters we're going to send to medic school, they don't have to travel. They're right here in our station learning, and to get back to their station, they might be in it, or they have to go right down the street. So it lowers travel time, it lowers backfill costs. So we're trying to continue to build in efficiencies with training that have a positive impact on the budget. The other two things, you approved a fleet maintenance vehicle and an IT van. Those are both mobile vehicles, and the personnel that staff those now, we're building in efficiency. So, for example, if our mechanic, if it took him all day to get a preventive maintenance done on an engine because he had to go get it and bring it back to the shop, move it around, get the crew to change over. In this case, if he can go do the preventive maintenance at the station in a limited downtime, then do a second one, and he gets 2 or 3 PMs done in one day as opposed to one because of logistics. Same thing with IT. Run back and forth from the shop, get the right widget, you know, having it on that van where you walk out to the van, fix it, go to the next assignment. So I wanted to make sure that when we talk about budget and we look at the increases, first we talk that the staff, not only in our overall goal and in our process, but we have to put initiatives in fiscal year 21. This is what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about stuff that we want to do. I'm talking about stuff that we are currently doing that have a positive impact on managing the budget. So are there any questions on those initiatives?
No, I think they're...
Okay, good. So the last thing before I send it over to Gabe, hopefully he's still awake, is just challenges. And I know we've talked about these, but challenges to the budget, of course retirement is, and that comes up. There's quite a bit of increase with retirement. In this budget, the increase to retirement is $265,000, which is pretty significant in one fiscal year. So now, what can we do about it? Well, we don't have a lot of control of that, although we know there's some new leadership when it comes to managing our retirement, especially the PSPRS. We're hoping that their action in terms of assumptions and actuarials and you know, really looking at what the fund is making and projecting it accurately, that context of them making those decisions, then we can react to that and say, all right, capital, long-term thinking, how do we structure this out to better fund that liability? Another thing is, of course, our step increases, our COLAs. Step increase in this budget is $235,000. The COLA is $180,000. Now, we talked, and the preliminary wage study information we have, I think it validates continuing with those. And our goals when it comes to budget, thinking long-term and gradual increase, it validates staying with those. So I think we're staying competitive to continue that. And in this budget, I believe it's necessary to stay competitive. Of course, those two items, the board has latitude. You have latitude on approving this and giving direction, you know, which we receive. But just so you know, my recommendation is we keep those structured in because I think it's better long-term thinking. I think the wage study and the environment and trying to be competitive in the market, I think it shows that yes, we should have that structured in there. So just a note on that. Another area in terms of our challenges is the health insurance. It went up about 10% this year, which is a pretty big jump, and that's $120,000 to the budget. So again, that's an area where that's a tough one because we don't have a lot of control with the state, insurance agency says, oh, it's going to go up this much or that much or whatever the issue is. We kind of have to react to that. We brought up workers' comp. We talked about the day-to-day operating budget, how we're able to drop from last month to this month the draft budget $250,000 day-to-day operating. Now, there is a challenge on the other side when we pick the district pool, and that is there's capitalization. So that capitalization is $230,000, about $230,000. The pool is allowing us to capitalize that over a 4-year period, $57,000 a year. So we feel that's a minimal impact from what we're going to gain. We're going to gain control of the money. We're going to gain control of the premiums. We hope that with that governing board, we're going to be aggressive to go to them. If it's something as much as, hey, let's vote on having any district in this pool, they have to have 2 sets of turnouts, because we know that's good practice when it comes to managing our cancer. They have to have a gross decon kit on the rig. When it comes to mental health, there's certain things that we want all our firefighters to have available so that we can diffuse and debrief, and we won't get into mental health, long drawn out, expensive workers' comp issues. When it comes to our wellness, and our conditioning. So we think, and a lot of the districts feel, the fire chiefs feel the same way, that over time, as we develop that, we're going to get some really positive return on that. The company that's going to help manage that, we'll talk about that under our agenda item, but they're familiar with the district pools, with the teachers, and it's very effective. Now, teachers are a little different than firefighters. We are high risk, because there's a lot of high-risk things we are engaged in, but we think that there is some good background and history there of success in some things we're talking about. So that was another challenge, the workers' comp. We know that's going to be a challenge. And then the end leave liability, which we've talked about, that's $150,000 in this fiscal budget. So when I looked at challenges and tabulated the retirement, the step increases, the COLA, health insurance, workers' comp, the capitalization piece, right? And then the end leave liability, which is a capitalization, that totals $1.1+ million. So why am I bringing that up? I'm bringing that up because I think we were wise in how we approached it, but the wage and benefit side of this budget, that was the challenge this year, how we manage that. And I think hopefully we'll get some good leadership there on the retirement system and be able to start managing that better. Hopefully with workers' comp, our solution, over time we're going to be able to manage that better. Hopefully with end leave liability, as we fund that, we're going to manage it better. So again, all these challenges, again, I think, when we look back at our goals of long-term, let's think slower and gradual increase, I think we're going to come up to those challenges. And again, this budget, I don't see a lot of fluff in it. I see a lot of wage and benefit increases, a lot of it we don't have control. And the part that we do, it's prudent that we think long-term and continue to invest in that. And then again, this was not a budget too where we didn't apply initiatives that will affect this budget. I think we're sound, and it's the kind of thinking that staff we're going to continue to do. So, are there any questions on the...
I don't have a question, just a comment you might want to clarify with regard to the pool. And the company that is presently involved and so on, other than the formation of the pool, is from out of state?
That's a good question. Off the top of my head.
Not local control.
No, they are an Arizona-based company.
Yeah, I was going to say, isn't their headquarters Phoenix?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
We had 2 options on the table, and one was the current option we're with. And again, we've had a very good relationship with that company and very professional. It is a commercial company that does operate outside of the state, and very large company. The company that with the district pool, yes, they are a state entity, and again, the districts will pay the annual premium, but they'll put up the capital like we talked on, commensurate to how many people and in a fair way how it's calculated. They'll put up that capital to put the seed money to make sure there's money, because claims happen when they happen. But it's governed by a governing board. There's 3 from different fire chief districts that were people that developed this pool that will be off the bat, and then they'll do elections. It'll be a 5 to 7 board, governing board. We do have an internal employee who wants to apply for that. So when that election comes up, we're going to try to get that person elected, because that's just another good communication to have one of our members on that board as they make decisions. And then, it'll have officers, president, secretary, treasurer, et cetera, so forth, how we operate boards, governing boards with the officers. And then all the districts will each have a vote, and we'll be able to give our input on the control of those funds and how we're going to manage the premiums and, how we're going to look at the whole scheme of things. Now, we know that legislation will come back. The presumptive cancer one was the big one that started things. So it's coming back. Now, what are the long-term? I don't know. But I do know that I think we can structure things in our district pool that I think will give us a lot longer-term approach and thought on that. And it's our money.
Absolutely.
Chief, I first of all, I want to say I really appreciate the way that you have laid out the highlights of the budget, and especially where the increases have come from, and the way we saved money on some items to help balance those, mitigate some of those increases. You mentioned staying competitive, and through our STEP system and also through the COLA authorizations. I thought that for the public, it might be good to say more about why we want to be competitive, to talk about retention, to talk about all the training that goes in. If you could just elaborate a bit more about that.
Sure. So if our wage and benefit package is competitive in the market, 1, it's a way to attract employees. 2, it's a way to keep employees. And when you look at the cost of recruitment, training an employee, outfitting them with the proper equipment, and or computers, if they're admin staff, and the proper support. Often if you are a district or an agency that doesn't keep competitive with your wage and benefits, it's not infrequent that an employee would get in, you recruit them, you train them, you give them all the proper equipment, you get them functioning and operating, and then the next best job that comes up, they leave. Now, there's other factors, obviously, and those are internal, the culture, how positive the employees are. So recruitment's a key here, but staying competitive in the market lowers our attrition, and we're investing in employees over a 20, 25, 30-year period, and you don't want to lose those senior people when they're 3, 4, 5 years downstream. To lose them and then to repeat that recruitment, the training, the equipment, it becomes very expensive. So I think we've done a pretty good job of keeping within those boundaries because our retention is very good. Now, again, there's lots of external factors, right, which is our wage studies. There's internal factors, how we structure the step schedule and what kind of premiums are available for different types of specialties, hazardous materials, whatever it is. So we have to look at external and internal, but to retain an employee, pour everything we need into them to make them a high-performing employee that carries out the mission, that's going to always be the goal. Now, things can inflect on that, like they leave and go somewhere else, or they get injured. But again, our goal is to lower and minimize that because then we're managing that dollar much better. Instead of one position, 3 different employees, the first 2 leave and then another one, it's 3 times the cost to train them, really, to get them ready to go. So instead of 1 time the cost. So, yeah, I think that's the main thrust of it is what kind of environment do we have here? Where do our wages and benefits fit, relatively speaking? And then, looking at the external wages, benefits, looking at internal controls, how well do we structure all that? So once the employee's in, all they want to do is continue to progress and meet the mission and work as hard as they can. That's really our goal. And when we see employees doing that, we're accomplishing something very good.
Thank you.
Any other questions or points for the chief? Chief, is there anything else that you wanted to add for your part?
No, there isn't. So I know I was going to camp for a little bit on that. I'm not going to call it a soapbox, but I know since we've had this long process and we're getting down to end game where we're going to make a recommendation to the board or request that we can post the draft budget and progress towards approval in June. I wanted to set it up for Gabe, and then we'll have our finance director walk through the whole budget. Then, of course, entertain any questions that we need to, and or any direction that we need to from the board.
Okay. With that said, Gabe, are you still on the line?
I am, yes.
Okay. Was there anything else you wanted to add to the workshop portion of the budget process?
Chief had a very good explanation, very detailed. So I think I do have some stuff to add, but I'm going to kind of find, as I work through, maybe kind of go over some parts of my presentation a little quicker, because Chief already has given a lot of the detail, and then we can answer any questions the board has. Does that sound good, sir?
Sounds good to me. So you're good with the workshop, and we can move on from that and get on to the regular session? Or you wanted to add some?
No, I'd like to add, yeah, I've got a presentation prepared.
Yeah, he's going to go through now a presentation, a little more detail on some of the areas.
Okay, very good. Well then, Gabe, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you. Mr. Chair, board members, I hope everybody's doing well and staying healthy. Starting off, what we want to kind of go over today is re-highlight the budget process and where we're at. I do want to highlight some of our revenues. I think Chief did a great job on, discussing the big changes in expenses. So we'll take a look at them, but I think for the most part, the Chief's covered most of that. I do want to make sure the board sees the updated capital plan and allocation of fund balance. And then we'll end with the overview of our budget projections, and finally the draft budget and actually not only board direction, but as Chief mentioned, we would like tentative approval tonight, so we can post the budget for our 20-day posting. So, this journey on budget has started back in January. Chief mentioned the amount of work that staff has done to get the budget to where we're at today. As I mentioned today, we'll have our final board workshop and ask for tentative adoption tonight. We will then post for our required 20-day posting, and then come back to the board on June 16th for final approval. Now, I will say, if the board does choose to give us direction to make changes to the budget after the meeting today, you could still approve. We could post the budget, we could make the changes, and then you could adopt the changed budget at that June meeting. The only caveat to that is we can't increase the budget. If we increase the budget, we have to repost for 20 days. So does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So before I dive into some of the numbers, I just want to kind of go over the budget document itself with the board. And so here, that's not what it's supposed to do. Give me 1 second. Let me open up the actual PDF here. So Carrie sent over the entire budget book to the board last week. And so I just want to spend a moment and just kind of describe how it's laid out. So start off, you have your cover page with the various divisions. and who's responsible for those areas. Then we go to our budget summary, and this is the budget summary that everybody's used to seeing posted. It's got, and it gives just a high level overview. And the way the whole packet is designed is as you go from page 1 through page 135, it's just building on it. It's giving you more and more detail as you go further in. And so here is, kind of the overall summary. Then we have our line item budget detail. And this is what we see how our general accounts, our general ledger is structured with our different account types. And so, you have account types that serve across different divisions. So for example, salaries and wages, we have account code 5010, but 5010 is across all the different divisions we have. And just like other expenses such as supplies, communications, we've really tried to have, the main functional expense, and then we're able to break up stuff by division. And so that's why when you look through the budget book, you'll see, well, wait, I see salaries and wages here, but then if I go further down, I see salaries and wages again. And what you're seeing beyond this page here, beyond this detailed budget, is the breakdown on each division's costs within the budget. The next major section, we have our 10-year projections. And you can see our assessed value is projected based on the round study numbers. And then our non-levy revenues and then our expenses are growing at different growth rates based on what their historical growth rate has been for the district. Then we have our division budget summary, and this breaks down what the cost is of each division in totality. So for example, when I look at fire chief here of $296,000, that's the entire fire chief division. So that's his wages and benefits, but then also other expenses that go there for training, for dues and subscriptions, for professional services. All of that is in there. And you can see we've got all of our divisions broken out. And then finally, or I shouldn't say finally, then you actually get into the actual division pages. And that's where you see the breakdown on, okay, so for 5010, that's what's budgeted for 5010 under the fire chief section. 5090, our health insurance, that's what's budgeted under there for health insurance. And so you can go through the document and then see kind of what that detail is across all the major divisions. And then finally, at the very, very end of the document is our capital improvement plan. And that breaks down our cost by year, by item, and then at the bottom, we have our total numbers as far as expenses and what our proposed fund balance will be on our capital plan. So does that help from the board's perspective kind of explain the document a little better?
Well, I think it helps quite a bit as you explain how the breakdown occurs as you just have. In relation to the document you have up there right now, or the page of capital improvements, as it relates to apparatus acquisitions, maybe it's a screen or two above that or
Yes.
prior to that.
Yes.
There are some years that have 2 acquisitions and other years that have up to 4.
Right.
Does that create an impact that is more burdensome than in other years around it, or would it behoove us to make it maybe 3 every year rather than 2 or 4 or what have you?
Mr. Chair, that's a good point. The way we've set up our capital plan and our capital funding is we actually have level funding. So in the years that we do have a demand for more asset purchases, there's the funding available. And so, you mentioned the 2 versus 3 years, but when we come down here, our proposed funding to the plan remains fairly level, increasing over time. But we have, and then you can see we have adequate fund balance over those years to be able to afford all of the purchases included within the plan. And so it allows the district to follow the replacement schedule that's needed based on that asset and not have to worry so much about, are we going to impact cash flow or not? or are we going to have to change the budget every other year because of these items? And so we've done that smoothing that you've kind of suggested in the way we've set up the capital plan.
Okay, so it's a bottom line that is consistently or relatively consistent across the board, and perhaps within a given year, there may be 4 apparatus that are relatively inexpensive versus 2 apparatus that may be more costly.
Correct.
Okay.
All right. So with that in mind, as we walk through, so starting off with our 2021 revenue, and I put page 3 up because I want, as the board members, it's page 3 of the PDF. You can see the page numbers are down in the bottom right-hand corner of the pages. So the board can see where I'm at in the actual budget book, if they wanted to follow along there. So, as Chief mentioned, we've really looked at our revenues this year. Starting off the property tax collections, our property tax, we did see a 5.4% increase in assessed value. However, we're proposing a tax rate now of $2.47. And so that tax rate is actually lowers our levy disproportionately to that increase in assessed value. So although the AV went up 5.4%, we're really only increasing the levy to the taxpayers by about 4%, because we brought in other non-levy revenues to help offset the operating expense increase. I currently have FDAT still in at last year's numbers of $404,000. We should be receiving estimated numbers from the county any day. Once I get those, I will incorporate those. I'm hoping they are higher than what's in here, and all that'll do is then reduce that proposed tax rate proportionally to whatever the increase in FDAT revenue is. Non-levy revenues are going to stay at just over $3 million. There were no changes from last month's presentation on the budget. And as Chief mentioned, again, we're looking at what we're actually experiencing and improving some of our budgeting processes year over year. And that one major one being Wildland this year. So we're increasing that revenue from $100,000 to $500,000, which is more indicative of our gross billings for Wildland deployments. And then, as I've mentioned, we've budgeted in expenses. And if you go to the Wildland division page, last month there's some question over, well, it seems like it's in everywhere and it's not broken out. If you go to the Wildland division page, you'll see the breakout of those expenditures. So any questions on the revenue side from the board?
Any questions, any points? Not yet?
Not yet.
Okay, perfect. Expenses, couple things. Again, I just want to point out, again, if you're following along, starting on pages 4 through 6 of the budget document, Chief mentioned kind of our changes in personnel. One of the largest impacts you see from the budget today versus the budget that was presented last month is workers' comp. The price in there is based upon the board electing to go to the pool tonight. So that's what the number is in the budget. If you recall, last month we had a much larger number in there, and that was due to the unknown surrounding workers' comp at the time. Everything from the MOU negotiations is included. Buildings and land has been developed based on costs on utilities and compounded annual growth rate. We did have a significant reduction under station security, as the majority of that project is finished up. There's just a few monies needed next fiscal year to complete the project. Vehicles and equipment, again, looking at our actual usage of expenditures, we're able to lower a lot of those categories as well. But we did add for fire equipment maintenance and NFPA testing. Communications and IT, still working on streamlining budgeting process for computer software. We do have our 5% increase on dispatch costs per our IGA. Meetings and training, there were a lot of reductions under training, mainly due to COVID cancellations. But while I do mention, like Wildland has its division, but from a functional expense standpoint, it's part of it. There's those deployment costs, which are typically travel costs, fall under our meetings, travel and training functional cost category. And then finally, our managerial costs, for the most part, we had reductions again in professional services based on need and usage. But we do have an election this year, so we do have to budget that $33,000 cost under our management expenses.
Do we have to? Can I ask a question on that?
Yes.
So we don't have anybody running against the current board. Will we then have to incur that $33,000 or whatever the amount was?
No, we will not. So if the board runs uncontested, we don't actually have to have an election, and then we have that money as a savings in our budget.
Wait.
Okay. Perfect. Any other questions on that?
Gabe, I've got a quick question for you. On expenditures that are funded within a fiscal year, does that money that's allocated for that therefore have to be spent within that budgeted year?
That's a good question. So we go with a zero balance-based budgeting system. So we don't carry over money from prior year. We start zero on July 1. So if there's, for example, let's use this election expenses is a good example. So we budgeted $33,000. If come June 30 we don't spend that money, the board essentially has to reappropriate that money come July 1 for the new budget year. So you have to adopt the budget with that money added back in. If we don't spend it, what happens is that money goes to our overall fund balance and goes to help grow our fund balance. And then the board can elect, hey, we have this $33,000 savings. Let's put that into our end leave liability fund or something like that. Or the board could say, you know what, I want you to utilize this money for investment in PPE or something like that. But no, typically if an item's been budgeted in the fiscal year and it's not spent within that fiscal year, it will need to be reappropriated in a future year.
Okay, and the reason I bring that up, and Chief, perhaps an update with that Fire Station 3 heating and ventilation program, is that underway? I just don't want to lose that money. I mean, if we're underway on that project.
Yeah, that's, as far as I know, that's funded, and there's no issue continuing to move forward.
Okay, all right.
Okay. All right. And Mr. Chair, to your comment, that project's part of our capital plan, and I don't have all the detailed pages. Those are included on pages 132 through 135. But attached is kind of a summary of the capital expenditures. This year that we're currently in, we had 1.2 million in proposed expenditures. It actually, with COVID hitting and everything else, some of those projects did not get completed. So there'll be, the funding is still within that capital fund, Mr. Chair. And so that goes directly to your question.
Right.
Our capital fund works a little differently. You're adopting a line item budget. The board is, essentially approving the capital plan, but each item is taken to the board individually. So once it's approved and funds are appropriated from our capital fund, we can continue to use that until the project is completed.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And so just, again, Chief kind of hit a lot on what our process and philosophy is on our capital investments. But as you can see, we have a balanced capital plan. It does require increased funding over the next couple of years to get us up to our $1.5 million funding point. But again, we didn't want to just do that in year 1 or 2 and have a big burden on the tax rate. We wanted to allow our assessed value to grow over time to get us up to that funding level without a major impact to the tax rate. And again, I'll point out and reiterate that any item within the capital plan will be brought forward to the board for approval prior to prior to fund expenditures being approved. Okay. So our fund balance, you know, as Chief mentioned, the impetus on doing detailed budgeting and really getting the dollar amount in the budget based on our needs. Fortunately, we've had capacity in prior year budgets, which has helped us actually grow our fund balance over the last couple of years. But, you know, this year we're at the point where we're projecting ending the year with enough cash on hand to not only meet our capital fund obligation, but actually exceed the GFOA recommendation on fund balance. So you can see on this graph here, 2.9 million is the recommended fund balance, and we'll have 3.6. So that affords us some extra capacity within our cash on hand to be able to handle things like I'm going to talk about in a minute, this COVID-19. It allows us to have adequate funding on hand to be able to address the need to capitalize the workers' comp pool. That gives us that flexibility. And so we've really taken a strong focus on growing this. This is one of the areas, if the board wanted some cutbacks, we could make some modifications, because as you can see, we are exceeding that balance. I just want us to always be cautious of not artificially lowering our tax rate by spending down our money. We have to be very calculated if we ever start spending down our money on how we're doing it and why we're doing it. If not, we find ourselves back where we were in 2017 with, you know, minimal cash on hand for the size organization that we were. And you can see a capital fund of, you know, 360,000 for a district of our size. Any questions on fund balance?
Any questions? Nope. None.
Just to comment that yes, it's very important to have this capital, this contribution to our capital plan, so that we have money to reach some of our strategic goals without raising the multiplier.
Exactly. Okay. COVID-19, you know, Chief and I were talking, and this budget doesn't contemplate any COVID-related impact. And so as of now, and again, I don't want to go too far into what's further on in the budget, but, you know, as of last month, we've spent about $25,000 in COVID-related expenditures. That's PPE, medical supplies, and overtime costs for the EOC. For next fiscal year, the expenses and the impact of this is really unknown. We don't know how it's going to impact us. So what's the contingency plan? How have we, as your finance director and chief, plan to be able to handle COVID if and when there's a second wave? And so initially, as the initial impact occurs, we'll utilize fund balance, we'll utilize budget savings to make necessary purchases, necessary staffing, and make sure, you know, the district's able to respond effectively. If we see costs exceeding or extraordinary amount of costs starting to incur, Chief will make the decision to cut district spending, you know, down to just essential services. And so that will help further increase our capacity to be able to absorb those expenditures. In addition, and what's before you later today, there are funding sources. And so really, we don't see any of these needs as a need to cover the cost completely. We see it more as a short-term loan between being able to achieve reimbursement through different funding sources. And right now, probably the most common and applicable for us is through the FEMA declaration. There's reimbursements available through there, which we have for you later on. There's a number of grant opportunities available out there for PPE replacement and supplies. And then there's also the CARES Act money. that provided us a stimulus payment already through Medicare. And there's a second round of funding that we're going to look at applying for as well. And so I want the board, and Chief and I want the board to know that it's not that we didn't contemplate the COVID. We have a plan in place to address whatever does happen. And we'll obviously keep the board updated on what, if any, financial impact we see going forward on a second wave of COVID.
Gabe, you may have mentioned it, your very first bullet point, and maybe Chief, you could answer the question, is in a broad sense, can you kind of give us an update what some of those expenses were that gave us that amount of 24.6, just broadly?
Yeah, I think some of that's PPE. And Gabe, what were some of the other areas that we noted?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, thank you, Chief. About half of that, Chief, Mr. Chair, is personnel overtime for staffing the EOC. And then as Chief mentioned, the other half is medical supplies, PPE, and so that makes up the other half of that expenditure.
Okay, thank you.
And Gabe, how much money is anticipated from the stimulus money that we'll be receiving?
I know you were going to ask that. I have that note down for my finance report, but I don't have that note in the budget. So we've already received $53,000 from Medicare, from HHS, and then we actually just got the report today from ambulance billing, and we've calculated our loss because of a decrease in call volume from March and April year over year. Our call volume, our billable transports is down $300,000. So from a net collection standpoint, that's about $150,000 impact to the budget. So we will utilize that to apply for that second round of funding. And as I understand the second round, we should recover that full 150. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, a note on that too, when it comes to FEMA reimbursements, typically they'll reimburse up to 75% if you get that. So 25% is on the home unit. So just a note there, although I think with the different funding sources with grants, I think we'll continue to apply and try to recover as much as we can.
Okay.
So here's our projected budget. Happy to report that our overall budget's at $18,795,000, which is much less than what you saw last month. Again, Chief went through, worked with staff on making some additional cuts, but really making a decision on the workers' comp pool was the biggest driver for reduction. We do have a proposed tax rate of $2.47. And as you can see, next year's proposed budget is at $2.49. One other thing I want to point out as we've changed our budgeting process and philosophy is we've gotten rid of that carryover to balance the budget. If you remember a couple years ago, I mentioned kind of that dangerous path we were on by constantly requiring our budget to balance based on carryover funds. Because if you run into a year where you don't have carryover funds, you really impact your projections significantly. And so you can see we have eliminated that for the foreseeable future.
Gabe, I'd like to make a very minor point here, and it's a little bit confusing to me, and I don't know if it matters to any other board member or the public, but when I look at your document, and it's all well laid out, this is the year 2020, and as titled up on this particular page, the approved budget for 2020, when in actuality, that's fiscal year 1920. Whereas the next column where it says draft for 2021 is actually fiscal year 2021, 20/21, not 2021, which is next year. Perhaps in your world, it's not confusing at all. in my world, it's like, did we miss a year? Am I looking at a budget proposed for next year? Because this year coincides with 20/21. Does anybody else have that issue?
I was thinking about this. I've had to look 2 and 3 times to make sure I'm on the right year.
Yeah. Is that, I don't know, is it something that we want to put a slash in there to make it clear for us as we move forward? Because it'll happen, should have happened for last year's. Like the first column should read 19/20.
But it is the 2020 budget.
Yeah.
No, it is not. It's the 19/20. This one we're talking about is the 2021.
Yeah, it's
And it's the year happens to be,
fiscal year
It's a
21.
fiscal year,
Yeah.
October
Includes
through to
2021
October.
was July to June 30th, not calendar year.
right, and that's what's a little,
Fiscal year
But
2020.
I think when we are assessed, Gabe, isn't that what they're looking for? They want a fiscal year and they want it labeled like that?
Yeah, I think, Mr. Chair, this is actually something Chief Coyle and I discussed last year, and we actually changed this last year. So this is the second year that you're seeing it like this. The proper way of presenting the budget by year is by fiscal year ending. So it's actually improper to say 1920 because it's not 1920. It's fiscal year 2020. It's fiscal year 2021. It's fiscal year 2022. And so, as I mentioned when I started talking, that's something Chief Coyle and I kind of felt like we really want to present ourselves and present everything in a sophisticated manner that matches to what the proper way of doing it is, not necessarily, what's sometimes easier. Again, we weren't trying to add some sophistication to our processes. I think one thing I might be able to do, especially on this one, but and this is the only place that it doesn't break out the FY, is add in fiscal year. If I add in FY, maybe that'll help for fiscal year 21 instead of just seeing 2020, 2021.
I think ending, because I didn't know that's why this new way of highlighting, if you say fiscal year ending, but then that doesn't fit in the box. But I don't know why it's ending rather than starting. Why don't we do starting? But I'm hearing that there's a protocol here.
so.
Correct.
And you want it to be the same statewide.
I believe that's old school accounting, and that's how it used to be, and so I guess we're coming back into, or we're coming into a new era of accounting.
Yeah, so it's more of an education on my part, and I appreciate the explanation, and I'll come up to speed as quickly as I can. Thank you, Gabe.
Of course. Okay, so perfect. Then finally, we have the full draft fiscal year 2021 budget. As I mentioned, the total budget's at $18,795,000. The proposed tax rate is $2.47. And with that, I believe we actually have an agenda item further down for the board to actually adopt the budget. So at this point, there would just be any comments or direction for staff.
Well,
Okay. Any comments for him?
on the entire budget?
As presented in the workshop here, yes.
Well, all right, hold on.
Well, I think that we've been talking about the budget for how many? 3 to 4 months. And so at this point, we've made a lot of our comments, and we really appreciate the fact that this number is gotten lower than last month's presentation. Appreciate it quite a bit. The taxpayer will appreciate it. So that's my comment.
I think the comment that I have is that in addition to the budget coming down, the mill rate came down.
Yes.
And that is
Yes.
something that I did not anticipate. I think as of last month, it was still up 2 cents.
Yes.
And now it came down 3 cents for a total swing of 5 cents. So that's huge. And that's just an example of the hard work and going through every item that allows us to meet what we need to have. So, Al, any comment you might have?
You know, the value of real estate is going up. I see that, and so it automatically produces revenue and makes it possible for the mill rate to go down. And so it does demonstrate that we're not just taking advantage of the increase in property values. We're using it for the purpose of funding the mission.
Exactly.
In the end, I see no place for debate.
Right. Gene?
No, I agree. I think, from my perspective, the debate is over.
Okay. Joy, anything for us
No.
for the workshop portion?
No, I've actually, all my questions were addressed, and all my gazillion questions.
Good.
So,
I see you have everything flagged out for us.
Yeah.
Okay, with that said, Gabe, if that concludes your presentation,
Yes, it does.
then, okay. Chief, any additional comments?
No, I don't think so. Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, super. With that said, that'll end the workshop portion of our meeting. Let's take 5 minutes before we reconvene back into our regular session. Thank you.
Yeah.
With that said, we're back to our open session, regular meeting. First order of business is a public forum. Chief, do we have anybody willing to or wanting to speak?
No, we did not.
Okay, thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is our consent agenda that consists of regular and executive session minutes from April 21st.
I move to approve the consent agenda
Okay,
for April.
okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? And it also included April 29th, special meeting and executive session. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the consent agenda is approved. Next on the agenda is the financial report and updates from Finance Director Gabe Boldra. Gabe, you've got the floor.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. You have the April financial report in your packet. Starting off, revenue for the month of April, we saw 2.6 million in property tax collections compared to our budget of 2.75. So we were under budget by 137,000 on tax collections for the month of April. Non-levy revenues were at 409,000. We were over budget by almost 200,000 for the month of April. So that was really positive. The majority of that is on our ambulance revenue side, with 50,000 being the stimulus money from through the CARES Act. Expenses for the month of April, one of the kind of side effects we're seeing of complete lockdown on COVID is across all of our clients, we're seeing expenses this month being considerably under budget, with the exception of obviously some COVID related items. But total expenses for April, 1,056,000, which was 157,000 under budget for the month. And so personnel was under due to overtime costs being significantly under. One of the things is people aren't able to take vacation and take time off. So the need to backfill was decreased significantly. And then all of our other major categories were under budget for the month of April. Going on to year to date, our total revenue year to date is 16,906,000. On our property tax revenue, we are actually through the month of April still trending under by about 268,000. So I do anticipate we'll collect that money. There's not been any issues of tax collections that I've ever heard from any of the county treasurers. So I think it's just a matter of timing. We should hopefully see most of that hitting in May. Our non-levy revenues are at 2.9 million, which is actually over budget by 800,000. And the majority of that being wildland revenue, and then also ambulance revenues attributing to that positive variance. On the expense side, total expenses year to date are at $12,638,000. We are under budget for the year by $964,000. And so the biggest area we're seeing that variance is on personnel. We are under by $758,000. A lot of that was due to some unfilled vacancies, some personnel costs that we've not incurred. But again, I don't anticipate us obviously ending the year, but in a positive standpoint from a budget to actual. You'll see across all of the other major categories, we did end the year to date under budget in buildings, land, vehicles, equipment, communications, and managerial expenses. And that kind of ties back into, kind of the budgeting process and philosophy is we're working on tightening numbers down even more and really getting the number to what the need is in the year. So we should start seeing coming in closer to budget, the risk is then we have some account categories that we may go over budget, but overall, we have a balanced and responsible budget before us. Percentage of expenses, year to date, we've expended 79%, with 21% remaining for the last 2 months. Percentage of expenses by functional expense, personnel is our highest at 83, followed by communications at 5, operations at 8, and managerial at 4. Cash position and balance sheet year over year. So we ended the month with just over 12 million in total cash on hand compared to basically almost 10 million last year. So we are up about 2 million in total cash. Our other assets have increased as well from 20,200,000 to 21.8 million. A large part of that is capital investment, as well as our ambulance billing receivables. And finally, our total liabilities increased slightly from 26,168,000 to 26,370,000. And a lot of that is due to year-end audit adjustments for both pension and payroll liabilities. I will point out that the district's lease purchase did have 200,000 paid down year over year. So our actual debt we did pay down. Other liabilities have caused that total number to go up. But again, a lot of that is the pension related adjustments. Unless there's any other questions, that's my report for April.
Thank you, Gabe. Any questions for Gabe? No? Okay. I need a motion for approval of the finance report for April. Anybody?
I'll make a motion that we approve the finance report for the month of April.
For April 2020, okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the financial report for April 2020 has been approved. Thank you, Gabe.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is staff items. This is the Chief's report. Chief Trotwine.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm going to cover our normal chief report, although I'm going to put all the information in there. I'm going to skip and hit some select items just for time because I know we have a very heavy meeting and we're addressing a lot of things. So when we look at our 2020 incident summary, you can see the year-to-date totals is almost identical. Although when you look at the monthly trend, January, February to March, you can see again, we've had a slight drop in call volume, and I think that is related to COVID-19 impacts and the different changes on how people are managing their health care during that.
And less visitors possibly as well?
Oh, I think so, yeah. I think, we'll talk a little about that on operations, but definitely less tourism, less visitors, and the impact of the businesses being closed, up to date. I think we're responding less in those circumstances. So when we looked at our 90th percentile, our total reflex time, or our total response time, again, year-to-date, a slight increase. Now, you can see in March we had it looks like a significant increase, although when we looked at that, there were, again, remember March had less calls, so when you do data like this and you have less calls, there's more a chance of outliers impacting that total number. So during March, this time that we're reflecting, there are 6 outliers that I think really skewed that 90th percentile response rate. And they were motor vehicle accidents and backcountry calls. And those 6, they ranged to get on scene anywhere from 11 to 22 minutes. So, you know, a call 20, 22 minutes, put in that data, it really pulls on that. You know, the discussion down the road is what is an outlier and what should we really look at. So just note on that, I'm not concerned with it. I think there's a reason for it. And those 6 outliers, I think, really impacted that total response time. And again, we're looking at less calls too. So those two.
And by outlier, you mean, what does that term mean?
Oh, an outlier would be when you're pulling data, if you're looking at total response time, one that's unusual, you know, longer than normal, like a 22-minute response time. Oh, well, that's, and again, that it most likely was one of the backcountry rescues where, you know, I mean, are you on scene if you don't see anybody? Well, we can be on scene at the trailhead. And again, even getting to some of the trailheads takes a ton of time. So now there, yeah, it's one that's way more outside the normal response time. So that 11 to 22 minutes, those are pretty significant. Took us a while to get there, but motor vehicle accidents, backcountry calls, that's not uncommon based on where in the scenario. So again, you know, I think that impacted our average response time when you look at the March also. But year to date, everything's looking very similar from last year. And then you have our slide here that reflects the call volume spread out between the districts, and that's not unusual there. So operationally, I want to highlight a couple things with COVID. So what I do want to highlight is we're maintaining our protocols and our work plan. Now, we know that Arizona's opening, and the different business and different functions out there have been given parameters by the state on what that looks like. So, but we're going to continue to maintain our protocols and our work plan because we think that there's other criteria we're looking at. So here, I want to give you some of the criteria that we're evaluating. One is when you have a trend where you have the number of new cases, it has declined for 14 days. So we're not really seeing that right here yet. There are some states you start to see that, but if we can get a 14-day period where the number of cases actually decline, that's a good criteria and a measurement. So for us, we're going to kind of keep our situation awareness and guard up. Right now, a second criteria we're looking at is it's the testing capacity. So our rapid diagnostic testing capacity, making sure it's of sufficient test, and an FDA-approved sufficient test, and at a minimum, we're able to test all people with COVID-19 symptoms, including mild cases, as well as those contacts with essential roles. So when we get out there and make that contact. So if you look at the state, the testing capacity is increasing. We don't think it's quite where we would want it to be to lower our guard, but, you know, from looking for a 14-day trend of a decrease in cases, also looking to where there's enough testing capability in laboratories where we can get a real good, accurate FDA test and get a turnaround on it. That's the second criteria. The third criteria we're really focusing on now is just there's sufficient public health capacity to conduct contact tracing in all the new cases. So again, from a health department perspective, that becomes important. So if we find someone with COVID, then they put a caseworker on and say, all right, how many people did they contact? We know you have it, so, well, you're with your family, we should test the family. Ooh, we know you worked at this location, we should test the coworker. So slowly you can see it in this state and other states, that capacity to have contact tracers is improving. So again, while we're going to continue to maintain our demeanor and situation awareness is we want to see those 14-day trend of cases decrease. We want to see widespread capability for testing. And then also we want to see the ability to do that contact tracing. Because the contact tracing helps you get your arms around who's getting exposed, and then you can quarantine and contain it. So that's my update kind of on COVID, just to tell the board, hey, we're continuing to sustain our plan. We think it's a good one. And now, again, with everything opening up and a lot more contact up in the canyon with the community around town, we're going to keep our guard up and look at that data. Any questions on the COVID?
Chief, who's doing the, what agency is doing the contact tracing?
Well, typically the counties, it would relegate back to the county health departments. And then the state, the state health the state health agency, those are the ones that have to develop that capacity. And again, I don't know if it's relative. There's some states that are way ahead of that. Of course, like New York's been dealing with it for a lot longer, and they're hiring thousands of workers to do this kind of work. But again, the experts are looking at those three criteria. They're saying, hey, that's what we really want to see. So I think that's where a lot of the efforts in the counties and the states are. Hey, how do we hire those people and get that kind of contact tracing?
I wondered, my first job out of college was as a public health nurse in Marin County, California, and I was assigned to the TB clinics, and so I did some of that.
Yeah.
And it's pretty important
Yes.
to be able to isolate people who could be carriers and be contagious. But I just wondered, are we equipped in Arizona to tackle
Yeah.
that?
I don't have the specific answer here. I know in terms of Arizona, we are improving the capacity, and it's one of the criteria, one of the goals.
Okay.
So, and again, as we start to see that improve, I think we're going to get to where we can maybe lower our protocols a bit, But again, I think we're set up nicely to manage it.
So, Roughline Sotheby's International, company that I work for, sorry, it's annoying. Our new protocol is everyone, if you come into our office, you sign in where you came from, basically. So we're actually practicing that as a company, and I see a lot of companies doing that now, helping the health department. So, especially in Arizona. So if that helps, for any info.
Chief, before you move forward, do we have a unified approach to what you're discussing right now amongst the other surrounding districts, so that we're all more or less doing the same, or are we all on our own, or how is the area or the region from the fire service point of view looking?
Yeah, I have a weekly meeting. We skipped last week, but it's a weekly meeting with the Verde Valley chiefs. So we talk about COVID and our response to it. I think that's a good mechanism where we've talked about some of the protocols and things we're doing to try to get on the same page and learn from each other. And then, of course, Yavapai County does two different briefings. One on the Verde Valley side, leader, that we get on and attend and listen, and that's another good mechanism where we get reports from the EOC, we get reports from the county health director, we get reports from the supervisor and the different political leaders in the different districts to make sure that we're managing it and keeping on the same page with CDC recommendations, Arizona Department of Health recommendations. So those are two more regional, because they deal with the Verde Valley and the county. I think that are been very good mechanisms to keep everybody focused on the same stuff. Now, district to district, there's variations on what everyone's comfortable with, but I think we're probably more conservative here, and that was intentful, because again, the goal was if none of our personnel get COVID, well, we know that they're not quarantined, we know that they're showing up to their tours, and we know that we're carrying out our mission seamlessly, really. It's business as usual, other than all the different changes we're making in the field and with staff here in admin. So that was a goal, and so far we've sustained that, which I'm extremely happy
Awesome.
about,
That's
based
really
on
amazing.
conditions.
Yeah.
So again, the discussions we have in our staff and leadership right now are, wow, when do we start to ease back? And they're good discussions, and we just reevaluated our training, and we pushed again until June 15th. We'll reevaluate that. We're reevaluating our admin work plan, began in June 1st. So we're going to continue to have discussions. We're going to watch the data, watch the criteria, and then decide as a group, how do we ease out of that. Right now, my comfort level is, no, we've worked hard to sustain where we're at. Let's do that. Let everything open up, start to interact, see how things go.
Well, the increase of tourism, especially not just the hikers, but people walking in and out of shops and restaurants. If there was going to be contact caused by that increase of strangers in town,
Without masks.
without, tourists
No
aren't
one's wearing
wearing masks. They're hard to find with. I guess that'll show up.
Yeah, and that again is one of the reasons we're gonna keep our awareness up, because it's challenging. You know, the planets kind of are lining up this weekend, right? It's our first big holiday weekend. The state just opened. A lot of places in the state haven't completely opened, but all the news media, less down south of Phoenix, are very clear that Sedona is the place to come on a weekend, because it's beautiful here. So
Sorry.
our firefighters have been up in the canyon even last weekend. It's incredibly busy. There's a lot of people. And so we're going to do everything we can, but I think, and I think the city's done a very good job of putting out messaging. You know, we did, if you saw the Sedona Fire District with the police department, we did a nice PSA.
Yeah.
That
was cute.
Stay Clean Ready, which is the city and the county and the state, we're focusing on that. And I think, you know, that kind of messaging, and then we're just trying to lead by example. You know, if we
The
go to the
electronic
store, put a
sign.
mask on.
The electronic sign is active there
Yep.
at Lake.
Yeah.
And right here on 89A as well.
Oh,
And going out of town.
Well, the traffic was streaming in Saturday and Sunday.
yes.
They're heading north, 179.
Oh.
They're coming.
Oh.
Some of the hotels were filled last weekend.
God,
Yeah.
parking
Yeah.
lots were
Yeah,
filling up.
yeah.
So I think it'll stay challenging for a little while, but we have some good leadership here in the district, and I think staff's doing a phenomenal job of managing it. And, you know, we're just keeping each other in check, but we'll see what the effects are, you know, as long as people are following the measures, and I think we can manage it, so. That was the big deal under operations. You can see, you know, we have, the significant thing is we've had a lot more MVAs, or motor vehicle accidents, rollovers, and also our backcountry rescues. Those are up, they're gonna be up. We'll see some of those on the weekend. We will staff up for the weekend. Our wildland related activities, obviously, we're shifting gears as a state and as a region and preparing for wildland deployment. We're starting to get some fires out there, and again, we're well prepared for that. You know, the challenge to the incident management teams across the state is how do you implement COVID measures for these fires, especially when they get bigger and you build camps out, 500-600 firefighters. So I think they're doing a good job of getting on top of that and ahead of it. Of course, our Type 3 engine, we've completed our training, and we're ready to deploy on that. So there, you know, I have high expectation that will get deployed somewhere this year. So, you know, those are the kind of challenges in operations. When it comes to community risk reduction, we're continuing to follow our modified schedule. Get the next slide on that. Heidi, can you go to the CRR slide? There we go. So I wanted to highlight on the CRR the notable event. So, you know, we were able to get out in our modified form, but start inspecting some of the gates. And so we were able, the CRR was able to do a very good overview and update a lot of the keys and dates and, gates. So that was very beneficial on our mapping, making sure that they're working properly and making sure we have access. It's something that, you know, we can't really do every day, but when we've modified some of the contact we need to make with public, there's things that we're trying to do that that are going to help improve the safety of the community, but keep us less in contact, but it's things that we needed to get to. It's just, we changed the priority. So I think that was a very good accomplishment. Under EMS training, next slide. One thing I want to note here, just as our total training hours, we're 1,193, and again, you can see some of the categories that we're training in. We're not backing off on continuing to prepare our firefighters and make sure we're prepared and ready. So again, you know, that's important for our training, our EMS, to continue to keep on our protocols and train. Okay, next one. Yes.
Chief, I just see something here about
Ed,
Division Chief Ed Mazulis
Yes,
congratulations.
earning
Way to go,
his
Jeanette.
master's degree in public administration.
Yes.
with
Yes, he
emphasis-
did.
An emphasis in healthcare management. I mean,
Amazing.
It's just incredible that we have that
yes.
Yeah.
here in our SFD workforce, and I think he deserves a big
Yes,
congratulations.
100%.
Yeah.
I agree, and just as a note, a side note, when we talked a little earlier, and I talked a little about the district pool, an inside candidate that we will ultimately put up to be on that board, he was the one that volunteered it. I appreciate you seeing that, because, you're right, that is a great accomplishment, and it was district-supported accomplishment, when we look at our professional development, and not only that, this district pool and that governing board, to have someone like Chief Mazulis on that board that has a master's degree in a related field, this is going to be a perfect, a schoolroom for him to now take what he learned and apply it. And I think we're going to see some great things, so we just got to get him voted in when we vote.
Okay.
Yes,
We'll get the other, we'll
I
get him
agree.
out.
Up the ballot.
I concur.
Yeah.
What?
So no, thank you, Becky, you're right. Great job.
Silly.
So, obviously, we've slowed down our events, but you can see, we're going to continue that work plan as we talked, as we evaluate the criteria and the opening. And then you can see our mental health moment. As the community and state begins to relax restrictions and opening for business, many community members, family members, and staff may be apprehensive about resuming normal activities and have questions, and I think that's really valid. So do what feels comfortable for you. No need to participate if you'd rather wait. And if choosing to resume more activities like shopping or eating out, remember to maintain the social distancing, wear a mask, and then of course wash your hands a lot. So again, this is important to note. We're opening, and we're going to all do what we think we need to. And it really should be no shame if you
Right.
feel like you need to
Yes.
not go out in public or go sit in
Yes.
a restaurant now and keep ordering out. That's fine.
Mhm.
Or if you feel like you're ready and you want to go sit in a restaurant, that's fine too. So again, we're encouraging, hey, do where you're comfortable, and I think that just will be supportive of each other on that.
Exactly.
So just to finish off then, again, we'll have more updates downstream about the strategic plan and everything, but one thing I want to know then again is, so a lot of the conversation is how we integrate our goals with the budget, and vice versa. So where we want that to be integrated, as we start to develop some of these larger goals as a district, the strategic plan, really, we can have great goals, and if it's not integrated with our budget and our line item and those, it doesn't make sense, because they are two related things. And as we work on the standards of coverage, again, you'll see how that will interrelate also. So I'm excited about that as we move it forward. And you can see on the purchase order, we had a couple there, hydraulic, our communications for equipment for $12,000, and then the chiller services for Station 3, you brought that up, Chairman Soto. So that's moved forward also.
Okay, good.
I believe that's it. I didn't want to camp too long, but all the information's there if you have questions, and we wanted to make it a little more brief just because
Just
we
the
know there's a
one-
lot of items.
Yeah, the one comment is we got a very generous donation. It's
Oh,
listed
yes.
here.
Yes, we had a couple of them, and one of them you see, and there's,
Sandy.
when you look through the packet, the two donations, you can see those in the thank you section. So please review those, you're correct, and I was very appreciative, and the two donations, and again, you can see some of the specifics of what they're around, but really, they're really appreciative, the community's really appreciative of our service, and our contact in the community, and it's not just our medical runs, it could be rescues. I got a great email from a gentleman who, this last weekend, when we went on a backcountry rescue to I think it was Fay Trailhead, Fay Canyon Trailhead. We worked in conjunction with DPS. They brought their helicopter in so we could do a short haul, and boy, the gentleman was so appreciative. His wife was injured. We went in and made contact with her and stabilized her, and did the helicopter rescue with DPS. The sheriff showed up, so seeing that coordination, the husband, he was so thankful. He wrote a long letter, but he wrote it to the governor also. And he highlighted us and said, hey, you know, thank you for allowing that state helicopter to come work with Sedona Fire. That was critical on this rescue, and we do have individuals trained to do that. That's a great partnership, and it's an important partnership, and he wanted to highlight that to the governor, too, to make sure the governor didn't back off on services like that here, and that's noted. So those thank you letters are always great things to sit in and realize how impactful that the firefighters are to the community.
Very nice.
And with that, I believe that's the end of the chief's report.
Okay. Well, I think it's a very deserving thank you to all the firefighters
Yes.
during this past period and the job they've done, as well as staff, to accomplish what they've accomplished this past month. So thank you to all, and Chief, great report. Thank you. The next item for discussion on the agenda is, let's see, propose the fiscal year 2021 Sedona Fire District budget. Board and staff discussions, approved to publish, Gabe and the chief. So we got our budget, proposed budget.
So when you can see from the board communication, so staff and myself, we recommend that the board would take action to approve the draft budget so that we can post it for the legal 20-day requirement with the intent then in June to seek approval from the board for the budget.
Chief, for all practical purposes, we're still working on the budget to fine tune where we can between now and that posting date. Is that correct?
Correct, and when we look at the 20 days, we probably want to post hopefully by the end of the week, Thursday. That'll give us an opportunity where that 20 days will end about a week before we come back in June for the board meeting. And I think that gives plenty of opportunity for the community to give input. And then, like we've talked, you know, adjustments up after we post, unless we repost, we cannot go, but we can adjust down at that point.
Right.
So I think there is time in there to adjust anything that we need to.
Okay. With that said, we've reviewed that budget inside and out. We've worked on it since January.
I'd be pleased to make the motion.
Okay, with that said, just as a quick reminder, we took that multiplier from 250 down to 247. We looked at reducing the overall budget from what it was presented last month to what it is today. And I couldn't be happier. I mean, it looks like it's a good package all the way around. So coupled with the MOUs that are on there also. So with that said, Corey, if you'd like the honors.
Sure. Yeah, I move to tentatively adopt the FY 2021 budget for $18,795,507 and authorize staff to publish the proposed budget as required by law and hold a public hearing on June 16th, 2020.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor of the tentative budget? Aye. Any opposed? Then the fiscal year 2021 budget, proposed budget is approved. Okay,
Great.
thank you.
Sir.
Next item on the agenda is the discussion possible action for Resolution 2020-01, enter the Arizona Fire District Workers' Compensation Pool. Chief Trotman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we've had, in context of the MOUs and in context of the budget, obviously we've talked about this a little bit, so I'll highlight a couple things and then we can entertain any more questions. But this kind of pool with the fire districts has been considered before. Some of you may be aware several years ago, and I think when they were ready to launch, there was a lot of questions about it, and I don't think it was as carefully mapped out. And getting a number of districts to get a good amount of seed money to develop the fund, they didn't get all the districts that they needed. So, this isn't the only, like, district concept pool that's out there. Like we talked, there's one for the teachers that, has been very effective. So, we're back to the district pool concept again that was out there. Now, there's some differences this year, and we'll talk briefly about that. So, when we talk about the legal makeup of the pool, it is owned by the fire districts. Also, there's an elected governing board, and then this pool will be administered by Ashton Tiffany. And another key point on this district pool is it's regulated by the ICA, or the Industrial Commission of Arizona, and then the DOI, or the Department of Insurance. It's not subject to the NCCI, or the National Council on Compensation Insurance, or EMOD, which is Experiencing Modifier. So let me briefly say, typically our insurance, our workers' comp, in the commercial insurance we use, the EMOD is like it's a scale, it's a formula, and it goes by claims and how much the claims are and how long they are. So they put a calculation in there, and if you have a lot of claims, it could keep your insurance rate up pretty high for 2 to 3 years. And then that, let's say that bad year falls off. So this is not going to be regulated by that. It's the Department of Insurance and the Industrial Commission of Arizona that set those premiums. So again, I think that's a change in how we would do business, and I think that's a positive change. So what are some of the benefits? We've already talked. It's local control. It's fire district money. It's Arizona money. Also, when we've looked at this, what they've seen over time is it will lower the administrative cost of it. So typically our commercial insurance could have up to a 35% administrative cost. This, what they're projecting, it could be around a 15% administrative cost. So for that component, as we map it out and it develops, I think we're going to see some cost savings there. And again, this is a longer-term approach. We talked about budget. This is a longer-term approach, and I think it's going to be effective. So any profits that we would make, they stay in the pool. It doesn't go to a company. The districts, the fire districts manage that pool. The governing board manages the pool. The initial pool, when they tried it, like I talked about, they needed a critical size, a certain amount of districts, and a certain amount of money to get going. This particular pool is more than achieved that. Whether we enter it or not, it's going to be solid and it's going to move forward. So the amount, the critical size and the amount of districts they need and the amount of capital, the amount of premiums they need to get this going, it's been attained. And, I don't know where we're at with numbers off the top of my head. I know there were, I'm trying to picture the number. There was probably at least 15 districts that jumped in. There was another 30 or so like us that are coming to their governing boards and asking for a resolution to pursue it. And I know there was another 60 that were looking at it. So I think the potential here, where we're seated right now with this district pool, is in a way better position when they considered the district pool several years ago. In terms of having the right amount of districts, having the capital, having the premiums, and again, back to that governing board, local control, local money, us managing our own destiny, really, if you want to put it that way, and putting control measures in and trying to improve our wellness, improve our cancer, improve our mental health. Again, I feel like, I'm excited about this because I think we can gain more control of it over time. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be hard work, but I think we have a better ability to control our destiny. And again, this Ashton Tiffany does manage a teacher's pool, and it's been very effective. And so the concept isn't new. The district pool, like I said, it was attempted several years ago, but I think we're in a way better position now. So those are maybe a little more of the highlights that maybe we didn't talk about yet. So are there questions on the concept?
I have a quick question. So in regard, I'm sorry, did I?
No.
So in regards to, you said it's not a new concept. That's what I was going to ask about because, I don't want to be a beta test, but also I'm really excited about the concept. So can you kind of fill me in a little bit in that area?
Yeah, again, Ashton Tiffany, it works with the school, the teachers, that they developed a district pool for workers' comp. Now again, A difference would be we're high risk,
Mhm.
and that's one of the reasons why our workers' comp insurance stays so high. You know, I mean, I suppose being on a fire engine on the highway in the middle of the night, pitch dark, cars streaming by, and you're trying to manage a patient from an accident, it's a little more hazardous than putting a new toner in the, you know, the copier like I might do, right? So again, but I'm not trying to be funny, but it really is. So the challenge becomes, how do we manage those premiums? So I think there is some history, there's some history and some stability from Ash and Tiffany, and they've tried these district pools and managed them before. So I think they're the right company to manage it. And again, it comes back to, I think the hard work we put into it and that governing board and how we manage the dollars and premiums, I think that's how we're going to get our results.
And how big would the district be physically? Is it all the districts in the Verde Valley, are they part of it?
My understanding would be any fire district in the state of Arizona can enter this pool. So they calculate your premium, they calculate what capital you have to put into it, and then once you achieve that, you're in the pool. Each district gets one vote for measures, and you have that governing board and officers that manage it. So yeah, any fire district. The hope would be we could draw more fire districts into it, build it over time, manage our premiums, put control measures in, really manage our workers' comp. And I think, again, the company should be able to handle that with us because they have some good history. And then getting our teams involved, I think, you know, with our local issues, I think it's, you know, it can be very exciting. Again, I find myself excited because something like this where we know we're always struggling with cost and how we're going to manage this. If you throw it back at me and say, how do you want to manage it? Oh, you know, I get to make some of the decision and some of the measures. And we can try to get one of our guys in that board, you know, and try to bring things to the board for approval. I think that's an exciting notion. Now, we don't know the future. Again, there's always a gamble when we change something, but I think we're in a way more stable position as a state, and this district pool is way more stable than the prior attempt. You know, and again, some of the legislation that will come back, we don't know what's going to happen, but we'll take it as it comes.
You know, Chief, one of the concerns I see that I have for me, and Al kind of brought it up in his point, is that between Copper Point and 7710, companies that would run this sort of workers' comp insurance program out of state, they're a big business, and they're responsible to their shareholders to turn a profit. And we don't have any control over that. Therefore, the compassion for us doesn't exist from that company or any other district, you know, within the state of Arizona. When you look at the number of districts within the state of Arizona, I don't know if you have an idea of how many districts there actually are. There could be hundreds. Everyone is eligible for this program, as you said. When I first heard of this program, I thought, well, this would be great for the Verde Valley, you know, for the 25, 30, you know, stations and the 5 to 10 different districts, you know, that we have. This would be great. Well, it's bigger than that. And the ability to be self-sustained, the monies derived from the premiums we send that way stay within the state, within the districts. It, as you described it, is a win-win situation. No one knows the future, but when you have a vested interest in that, you're going to do everything you can to ensure that it is a good, solid program. So I think without a doubt, this is the right direction to go towards, and to, I would hope that the membership is excited about it. And as things progress, I think we'll find out where the bumps are in the road, and we'll iron them out. And I think we'll all become better for it. So as you described, I'm excited. Any idea how many districts are out there in the state?
About 158.
About 150 plus?
158.
158. So that's exciting. I tell you, if they all join. Now, I don't know about fire departments that are part of a city government, if they'd be eligible to jump into this or not, but for right now,
Yeah,
I think that's a solid base.
This is for fire districts.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, municipalities are a little different.
Yeah. Okay, super. All right. Any other further comments? Chief, anything else on your?
No, I think that would close it, just a recommendation that the analysis we've done and staff and myself, we think this is a good direction to go. And so obviously, as I would recommend the board adopt the resolution so that we can move forward with it.
Okay, well, I have lost my place in my space. Does anybody else have
I
that?
could do it.
You have it up? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I move to approve Resolution 2020-01 to enter into an agreement with the Arizona Fire District's Worker Compensation Pool and authorize the fire chief to be the representative authorized to execute an agreement on behalf of the district.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion on that? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the resolution is passed. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is discussion possible action for Resolution 2020-02 to designate Administrative Director Heidi Robinson as the Director's applicant agent to receive emergency assistance from State of Arizona and or the federal government. And that is Heidi Robinson as the designated person. Is that, Heidi, are you, okay, you're going to give that?
There.
Okay.
I can if you'd like me to. I'm in the sunshine. I'm really sorry about my camera right now. Hi.
Hi, have at it. You've got the floor.
All right, so the Arizona Department of Emergency Management and Military Affairs has set up a portal, a web portal, much like the FEMA grant site, so that we can easily access application for funding for COVID-related expenses. We talked about that earlier in the budget discussion of what our current expenses are. We don't have an estimate. It's difficult to estimate what they'll be for the coming fiscal year. But this site, the portal, is going to allow us the best and most streamlined access to that funding, and as we understand it, the only access. Branda Brothers, our payroll and benefits specialist, has gone through the complete training on how to access it and provide the data that they require in the manner that they are looking for it, which is very similar to the Wildland billing process. Carrie has sat in on a few seminars. Gabe Boldra and his staff, of course, have sat in on a few of them, and we have another one scheduled for tomorrow. So it's a layered process where they basically want us to assign a applicant agent. So we are the applicant and you're assigning me as the agent, so that I would have the authority to sign on the document saying, yes, we filled it out correctly. Yes, the information is correct to our understanding. And yes, we would abide by any of the funding responsibilities, which is essentially just a reimbursement as far as they've explained it. So it takes the board action out of any requirement going forward, which just streamlines the process so we don't miss deadlines, and we can just submit the paperwork as quickly as possible. So being that I have signing authority with the district and have the most flexibility to work with the staff, it's our recommendation that I be designated as the agent. Branda Brothers will be our primary enterer. She'll be our primary access to the portal, and then Carrie Tarver will be the backup to that, also being familiar with accessing the grant portals.
Okay.
Is there any, if there are any questions, there's no cost associated, there's no fees for us to have to do it. I don't have signing authority to pay money, I have signing authority to receive it. I'm not sure if everyone's reading or if we've lost mic access in the boardroom.
Yeah, I'm not certain either, Heidi. I heard you loud and clear, though, on your presentation.
All right, Gabe just texted me to ask if he's to chime in.
I heard you. Yeah, I heard you just fine.
All right, let's text Carrie. Can you hear us?
All's good.
I can hear you.
We may have lost the boardroom.
I just texted the chief to advise him.
And I've got Carrie. Standing by.
He said he could see us. I advised him that we could not hear them if they were talking.
Oh, it doesn't look like they have a microphone anymore.
Yeah.
They've been disconnected from our sound.
How are they connecting?
So I don't know, their video, it looks like their video is in, but there's no microphone showing up in the participant view as if they weren't connected to audio.
He said he can't hear us either. So I'm going to suggest that they disconnect and reconnect since you're the host.
Okay.
Are they doing this off of a computer or?
I think they're doing
Off of
it off of the computer in the boardroom. So the podium.
Oh, wow.
We are very close to the end of the meeting.
Yeah, we're doing good.
Should I remove them? I removed them as co-hosts so I could remove them. They're not disappearing.
Yeah, I'm going to mute myself and I'll call the chief.
Okay.
Hey, he's checking with Carrie to see if they're still recording live in there, or
Yeah, she's still recording live in here, but.
okay.
So, it is still recording
All right.
on mine as well.
And it still shows us recording, so just know that we can't hear anything. So if you ask any of us any questions, we won't know that.
Copy that.
All right, sir. Bye.
Thanks.
Okay, so he said Carrie's still recording in there. I know it shows us recording, but if there's no audio coming across, we may not be seeing that. But Carrie is recording in there as well. So
Okay.
I told him we'd stand by, but to know that we could not hear them if they asked us any questions.
Okay.
So there we were.
Okay. So they can't hear
I
us?
guess I'll mute myself.
Okay, and they're just going to conduct the meeting
No,
when
we
it's
don't.
over?
Yes,
Okay.
that's what it sounds like right now. So I'll just mute myself and continue to stand by. And if I get a text or a call, I will advise you guys.
All right.
So they can't hear us at all
Oh.
anymore.
Wait, hold on, you guys. It says they're connecting their audio, so
Okay.
don't get rammy.
And he needs.
My house, wearing my mask inside my house. Okay.
Congratulations, you're on.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you.
We can hear you now.
There you go. Joy, anything for us?
Well, I do have been sequestered, taking care of my mother, but I actually have been working with the public online, on Facebook and Instagram and so forth, trying to help people that need help, finding lost dogs, bringing food and so forth in my own neighborhood with the double mask on. But so that's all I've really been able to do at this point, and I've done all of it online.
Super.
running around.
There you go. Al, anything for us?
Nothing specific, other than the fact that I'm enjoying finding what restaurants or joints are open. And I have found that Vino is open with real serious distancing between all the tables, probably in the best position of all businesses to reflect you can be social and be away from people at the same time.
Great, thank you. Yeah. Corey?
Well, I certainly had a very good meeting by phone with Chief Trotwine to discuss some aspects of the budget and the MOU process. So I appreciate that very much, the education you provide and understanding that about the process. So I appreciate that.
Okay, super. And I, as well as with the rest of you, I've had several telephone conversations with the chief this past month. I can't tell you, it's been like at least 2 to 3 per week, dealing with the MOUs, dealing with the budget, dealing with the district, and in addition to that, also with legal counsel on some of these issues that have come up. And it is never ending, and it is always satisfying, I'll tell you that. There's always resolution on the horizon on some of these things. It's just a matter of how we're going to get there. So with that said, it's been a pleasure working with the chief and all others and staff as we got through this past month. It was a tough one, but we did it. So hopefully this next coming up month is going to be a little bit easier, but nonetheless challenging with the things that we have before us. So with that said, unless there's any other comment from anyone here in the room.
That's it. This really quick. I also had a great meeting with Chief Trotwine, and I just want you to know how much I appreciate all of your hard work, because you're really working hard, and it shows.
Okay. Thank you very much for everybody attending. Thank you very much for all your work you guys did this past month. With that said, our meeting this evening is closed. Thank you.
Corey, what are you doing?